87 parking tickets, a lien on my ranch, all for a car I don't own. My name's Jack Turner, retired Marine, self-sufficient rancher, and the latest target of the Willow Creek HOA's predatory scheme. They forged my signature, broke into my home, and threatened everything I've built since leaving the service. This isn't a mistake. It's a war. And if they think I'll surrender my land without a fight, they've never met a Marine with nothing left to lose. I found those 87 parking tickets and a notice of lien in my mailbox, and my hands shook not from fear, but from a deep, simmering rage. 6 years without a car, and suddenly I owed thousands in parking violations? Let me backtrack to show how I got pulled into this mess. My name is Jack Turner. I'm a 62-year-old retired Marine Corps veteran. After serving my country for over 30 years, I came back home to the quiet life I'd always dreamed about. I bought a peaceful ranch just outside a small Texas county where the cows outnumber the people and the stars shine brighter than streetlights. No noise, no stress, just me, my loyal dog Max, and the open land. I don't bother anyone, and no one bothers me. I haven't owned a proper car in over 6 years, not since my last pickup gave up the ghost. I decided to stick to my four-wheeler and an old military Jeep that rarely leaves the ranch. On the rare occasions I head into town, I call a cab or hitch a ride with a neighbor. My ranch is self-sustaining. I grow vegetables, keep some chickens, and spend most days fixing fences or enjoying coffee on the porch. So imagine my surprise when I opened the mailbox one morning and found a stack of parking tickets, all from a place called Willow Creek HOA. At first, I thought it had to be a scam or junk mail meant for someone else. But then I flipped to the last page and saw big, bold letters, notice of lien to be placed on property for non-payment. They were putting a lien on my ranch for unpaid parking violations from a place I'd never been, for a car I don't even own. The next day, it got worse. A man in a navy blue blazer and sunglasses drove up in a shiny black BMW, walked straight past my gate, and pinned something to my fence without so much as a knock. I watched from the porch, half a cup of coffee in my hand, while Max eyed him warily. When I walked over and ripped the paper off, I saw a legal notice confirming the lien was official. These people I'd never heard of were coming after my land, and I had no clue who they were or why. I tried to figure it out on my own, but soon realized how deep the trouble ran. According to the county office, my property was somehow added to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association jurisdiction 6 months ago. I couldn't believe it. I live outside the city limits and have never signed anything that would link my ranch to an HOA. The clerk at the office just shrugged and mentioned some new expansion plan. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone messed up. But that mistake was threatening to steal everything I'd built since leaving the service. I tried contacting the HOA. Every number I dialed went straight to voicemail. Days passed with no response. Then more tickets arrived. More warnings. A final notice. 10 days before they'd move forward with legal action. I sat on my porch that night, the stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, holding that notice and wondering how in the world I'd ended up in this mess. I'd served my country, faced bullets and bombs in deserts far from home, and now an HOA bureaucracy was aiming to evict me with a stack of papers. I decided it was time to confront them head-on. I woke early, filled my Jeep with gas, and drove to Willow Creek. The town looked like something out of a travel brochure. White picket fences, shiny SUVs, kids on bikes with oversized helmets, everyone smiling and waving. It was too perfect. I pulled into their community office, walked up to the front desk, and showed the receptionist the notice. She wore a red blouse and a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said I had to speak with their HOA manager, who apparently wasn't in. I said I'd wait. An hour went by, no manager. When I tried to wander down a hallway marked records room, 2 security guards stepped in my path, one with a buzz cut and a shiny name tag that read Kyle. They said I was trespassing in a building reserved for Willow Creek residents. That ended my visit in a hurry. Leaving the building, I spotted something odd down the road, A silver Mustang that looked suspiciously like the one a young man named Brandon had once left on my property. Same dents, same scratches. The license plate was caked in dust, but I recognized just enough of the numbers. I drove closer and saw a big "for sale" sign on the lawn. It was a two-story home, grass trimmed razor sharp, windows immaculate. Nobody seemed around, so I crept to the side where a small shed door stood ajar. Inside, I glimpsed stacks of files labeled with HOA codes. Before I could investigate, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. I ducked behind a hedge and watched a man with expensive shoes and a phone in hand unlock the front door. He was the same one who delivered the lien notice to my ranch. Puzzle pieces clicked. This house belonged to someone in the HOA, and Brandon's Mustang was right here. That car wasn't just a coincidence. It was a trap, and I'd already stepped into it. I beat a hasty retreat, but when I got back to my ranch, an even bigger shock awaited me. Another envelope, bright red, taped to my gate. Final warning in huge letters. 5 days left before foreclosure would begin. My hands trembled with anger. I'd fought too hard for this land. If they thought I'd just roll over, they were wrong. The next morning, I visited my old friend Charles, a tough, no-nonsense fellow veteran who'd become a private investigator after leaving the service. He lived in a nearby town. I spread all my tickets, warnings, and the lien notice across his desk. He frowned at every page. "This stinks," he muttered, "and not just a regular stink. This is swamp. We trust HOAs to protect us. But what happens when they're just loan sharks with lawn ordinances?" Charles booted up his laptop, searching through public records, property deeds, anything tied to Willow Creek. That's when we found out Willow Creek HOA wasn't just an organization, it was a fully registered business entity, and guess who the listed owner was? Brandon. The very kid who'd shown up at my ranch long ago, asking if he could leave his beat-up Mustang in my field. He vanished afterward, leaving the car on my land, which apparently was now fueling a pile of bogus parking tickets. Another document turned up, a development plan for Willow Creek's Phase 2. It highlighted all the land they hoped to annex, my ranch included. If they got it, they could build another 40 homes. My place was the linchpin, and those tickets were a scheme to force me out. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You're in over your head. Walk away before you lose everything." Charles and I exchanged glances. They were watching me. We just didn't know how closely. I drove back home on high alert. Sure enough, when I arrived, I saw my front gate wide open. Same gate I always locked. My gut clenched. Max wasn't barking. I stepped out of the Jeep, scanning the yard, and found a kitchen window shattered. Heart in my throat, I ran inside. Calling for Max papers were everywhere, drawers overturned, my safe open and empty. Then I saw my dog limping from behind the barn, tail down, blood on his fur. I ran in, heart pounding, calling Max's name. Then I saw him, limping from behind the barn, tail down, blood on his fur. Max whimpered, blood matting his fur. That dog survived sandstorms and PTSD with me. Now some coward in a BMW thought hurting him would break me? I pressed a towel to his leg, whispering, "We're not done yet, boy." They'd taken my real deed and left me with nothing but worthless documents scattered on the floor. As if the tickets weren't enough, now they had my original paperwork. I stayed up all night cleaning, icing Max's leg, and trying to figure out my next move. At dawn, Charles called to say he'd heard from a forensic document expert. My signature on the HOA forms was a blatant forgery, the notary's seal suspiciously copied from somewhere else. Then he read the lab results. "Ever heard of a notary signing deeds from the grave?" he asked grimly. Neither had the DA until today. Turned out the notary who'd supposedly witnessed my signature had been dead for 6 months. We took this to Sheriff Donnelly, a barrel-chested man with a silver mustache who'd served in a different branch of the military. He listened quietly while I laid out the forged documents, phony tickets, and break-in photos. Jack, he said, this is a serious setup. But it'll be tough to prove unless we can tie those documents directly to Brandon or someone on the HOA board. I told him I only had 5 days before they could foreclose. He shook his head. I'll do what I can. But be careful. Folks like these have money and connections. That evening, just as dusk settled over my ranch, a truck rumbled up the driveway. Brandon hopped out, wearing a crisp white shirt and a smug grin. He strolled around with his hands in his pockets, looking at my property like he owned it. Beautiful land, he remarked. Prime real estate, too. Shame about all those tickets. Then he took a step closer, his smirk turning vicious. Brandon leaned in, smirking. You think your service medals matter here? We own the judges, the clerks, hell, we'll even bury you in a VA cemetery. Sign the papers, or I'll make sure Max joins you. You sign the transfer papers, walk away, and this all goes away. No lawyers, no courts. You get a little cash. Everyone's happy. I glared at him. And if I say no? His smile widened. Then you'll lose it anyway, and we won't be so nice about it next time. He turned and climbed back into his truck. Tick-tock, Jack. You've got 4 days. Those taillights vanished down the road, leaving me fuming in the silent darkness. My land, my dog's safety, my pride, all threatened by some slimy developer. The next morning, Charles called breathlessly. Jack, you need to sit down. He dug deeper into the HOA's records and discovered that Brandon had formed Willow Creek from the ground up. Same pattern repeated in 3 other counties. Unsuspecting properties targeted. Signatures forged. Legal intimidation used to bulldoze rightful owners. The kicker? The notary who supposedly validated my signature died 6 months ago. That sealed the deal. They were forging dead people's signatures to make these legal expansions. Charles also learned the HOA had moved to accelerate my lien, scheduling my ranch for auction in 3 days. My head spun. All I'd done was offer to let Brandon store his Mustang for a week or 2, and now that single favor was being weaponized to frame me for parking tickets. He'd found me, studied my situation, an off-the-grid vet living quietly, and counted on me not noticing until it was too late. I paced my porch, fists clenched. How could I stop a foreclosure in 3 days against an opponent who had money, lawyers, and a head start? Charles and I decided on a risky move. We'd bait Brandon into confessing his scheme. It was our best shot to blow the entire operation open. I called him from a burner phone, pretending to sound beaten. All right, I said. You win. I'll sign whatever you want. I just can't fight this anymore. He seemed almost giddy. Smart man. Meet me at Willow Creek Park noon tomorrow. Come alone. I hardly slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Max limping or the shards of broken glass in my kitchen. I reminded myself that I'd faced worse in combat. This was my land, and I wasn't about to surrender it. At sunrise, Charles arrived, tucking a small recording device inside my collar. If we can get Brandon admitting he forged your signature, it's over. The sheriff and DA can pounce. Right on schedule, Brandon parked his black BMW and swaggered over to the bench I'd chosen. Without a word, he snatched the forged deed from my hand. You know, he said, it's amazing how cheap people give up what they love when they think the system's against them. That signature on the deed? Spot on, huh? Looks just like yours. Fear's a great motivator, Jack. He laughed, running a hand through his hair. Some folks fight, but you folded like a lawn chair. That was my cue. I stood up. That's all I needed, I said. He blinked, confused. Then Charles stepped from behind a tree, phone in hand, capturing every word. Brandon's eyes darted around, and he reached for something in his pocket, but Charles barked at him to freeze. Sirens wailed in the distance. Within minutes, Sheriff Donnelly and his deputies arrived. Brandon was arrested, cursing loudly as they read him his rights and hauled him away. I exhaled, thinking it was finally over. But that night, around midnight, I woke to Max barking like mad. I looked out the window and saw flames shooting up into the sky. My barn was on fire. I dashed outside barefoot, trying to spray the blaze with a garden hose. Charles was in my guest cabin and called 911 while dousing smaller flames. The fire department arrived, but it was too late. The old barn, my grandfather's legacy, was nothing but charred beams and ash. The marshal confirmed what I already knew in my gut. Accelerant was used. This wasn't an accident. The barn was ash. My grandfather's legacy gone. But as I sifted through the wreckage, I found something they'd missed. A single clue, and it reeked of gasoline. Brandon was behind bars, so someone else was carrying on the torch, literally. By morning, the local papers ran headlines. HOA developer arrested in land fraud scheme. Veteran speaks out. I didn't feel much relief, though. A bigger threat lurked. The sheriff returned, telling me Brandon was connected to other shady developments, but they'd also found a real estate attorney named Jarrett Tate who'd helped file the fake deed. Jarrett had serious connections, and with Brandon locked up, he might be the new puppet master. Sure enough, Charles discovered that Jarrett was trying to file a civil suit claiming I tampered with the HOA documents. Another angle to bury me in legal troubles. My blood boiled. These people didn't quit. They pushed until you broke or until you pushed back harder. We called in every favor we could. Charles had a friend in local news who owed him. Within 24 hours, a bombshell report hit the airwaves exposing the forged deeds, the intimidation tactics, and the break-in at my ranch. News vans showed up, wanting interviews. I don't like being in front of a camera, but I told them what happened. The phony tickets, the threats, the break-in, and my barn reduced to ashes. Media pressure worked miracles. The county clerk's office froze all actions involving my land. Then the sheriff called. Judge had issued a bench warrant for Jarrett Tate. I felt some relief for the first time in weeks. Charles and I sat down to a hot cup of coffee, thinking we could finally breathe. We were wrong. Another explosion rattled my windows. Max barked and ran to the door. We rushed outside to find the chicken coop engulfed in smoke. A deputy stationed nearby called the fire department, but the coop was a lost cause. Chickens scattered into the night, some injured, some gone forever. This time, we caught a silhouette darting into the woods. Charles and I sprinted after him with flashlights, eventually tackling him next to a parked ATV. When we yanked down his hood, I realized he was the same front desk clerk who'd told me the HOA manager wasn't in. Trembling, he confessed he'd been paid to pressure me, that he never thought it would go this far. He also spilled the name everyone whispered about, Mr. Black, a ghostly figure controlling the strings from the shadows. Brandon was just the front man. With fresh evidence, the sheriff turned the screws. We learned the real mastermind was a wealthy real estate tycoon named Gregory Blackwood. He rarely showed his face, preferring to funnel money through shell companies. Willow Creek was only one of many HOAs he'd corrupted, targeting vulnerable property owners, especially veterans or elderly folks living off-grid. He had a pattern of forging documents, collecting massive fees, then flipping the land for millions. Once Brandon was in jail, Blackwood used other subordinates to keep up the pressure. He must have figured I'd fold if he burned enough of my property. Well, he was wrong. Charles and I kept digging, sharing everything with the district attorney and the Texas Attorney General's office. They uncovered a decade of Blackwood's shady deals, including bribes and rigged elections. Eventually, the authorities raided his offices. Charges piled up: forgery, fraud, conspiracy, attempted arson. Brandon cut a plea deal to save his skin, testifying that Blackwood ordered him to target me. Many minions in the operation vanished overnight. Some were tracked down, others simply disappeared. I stood my ground, determined not to be run off. At last, my ranch was secure again. The lien got tossed out. My original deed was officially restored, framed now, hanging above my fireplace. With help from local volunteers and fellow vets, Charles and I rebuilt the barn. One teenager came by with a new chicken to replace the ones I lost, naming her Justice. People I'd never spoken to offered help, from hauling debris to hammering nails. The new barn rose stronger than the old. Even Max got a new bed and a ramp to cushion his healing leg. I'd expected to stay furious forever, but as the ashes settled, I felt a strange sense of gratitude toward all the neighbors who stepped up. My story opened their eyes to how easily property can be stolen when criminals know how to manipulate the system. A local reporter came to my porch, pointing her camera in my face. She asked what I'd say to the ones who tried to take everything from me. I said, they forgot one thing: you can steal land, burn fences, and even threaten someone's life. But you can't take the spirit, the heart of a Marine who's fought for his country. She asked, what now? I gazed across the open fields, remembering how close I came to losing it all. 87 tickets, one forged deed, 5 days to save my land. How do you fight an enemy that's already in your walls? You stand up. You don't let fear do the talking. I took a long look at the spot where my barn once stood. The soil was still dark with scorched earth, but the new structure was a symbol of resilience. I thought about every dirty trick they'd used: forging signatures, messing with dead notaries, hurting my dog, lighting up my barn in the middle of the night. They wanted a war? Fine. But this time, the rules are mine. And I've got 30 years of combat experience and nothing left to lose. Some might ask why I don't just sell and move somewhere safer now that the dust has settled. My answer is simple: this place is mine. I fought for my country, and I'll fight for my home. That's my final stand, because if you let the bullies and con men win, it doesn't matter how many battles you survived abroad. Defending your land at home, that's the fight that truly tests you. So I'm still here, sipping coffee at sunrise, Max by my side, a gentle breeze rolling across the fields. No fancy SUVs, no neatly trimmed hedges. Just open skies and honest dirt. In the end, they tried to rob me of peace, but they only reminded me that freedom is worth guarding wherever you are, whether on foreign sand or a Texas ranch. When you push a Marine who has nothing left to lose, you'd better be ready for the fight of your life. And that's a lesson they'll remember for a long, long time.